Hi, my name is David Montesano, and I'm an admission strategist with College Match. Welcome to this presentation, Jumpstart the College Admission Process. We're going to get started then. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you here at College Week Live's spring event, which is the largest college fair in existence. So we're going to start by talking about finding the right match for you. That's a really big issue, isn't it? So finding the right school for you. And why is that important? Well, one of the reasons is that 30% of the people transfer right now, and only about 60% finish in 4 years. And this is data that we know overall in the States, basically from all of the schools that are collecting it, that essentially college decisions aren't always made optimally. And it's a really big investment. After a home, it's the second largest investment that your parents make. But it's one that the return on investment is huge. It's over $1 million investment over a lifetime. So the other thing that you should think about is that you're really buying a network for life. It's a job network, it's a graduate school placement network, and it's certainly a friendship network. And in some cases, people meet their significant others at college. So it's also one of those places that just has a lot of meaning for families in general. So let's look at one of the biggest questions that you can ask yourself if you're a sophomore or junior. Are you looking at getting one degree and then a job, or are you looking at graduate school? If you're looking at graduate school, you might be looking at very different types of programs, okay? So again, one of the things to ask yourself, if you either have a student that's a sophomore or junior, or if you are yourself a sophomore or junior in high school, is are you looking at one degree and then a job, or are you graduate school bound, meaning that you're looking at law school, business school, medical school, or getting a master's degree, say, or even a PhD, right, in the case for some people, although that's a rarer thing for most people. So think about that, and one of the things that I like to do is say to myself, what is the percentage likelihood, maybe I don't know for sure, but it would be good to know what's the percentage chance of me going to graduate school, right? So think about it this way, if the percentage chance for you is over 60%, you're pretty much likely to go to graduate school, right? I mean, there's a higher than a flip of a coin chance for you. So you might really want to consider the kinds of colleges that have a better chance of getting you into graduate schools over schools that are going to get you a job at the end. And we're going to talk more about those two different types of schools, okay? So we go through this. Now, there's basically, in our system, we have the most robust system in the world right now because we're the current empire. And right now it's great, but it also makes it difficult and complicated for students to make these choices with their families because there's so many different great schools out there. There's no wrong school. There's just the right school at the right time for the right person. Think of it like a tool for gardening. You want to pick the right tool for the job. So let's go through these briefly. We'll start with, this is an example from California and also the East Coast in the case of the specialty schools here. But let's look at the liberal arts colleges on one hand. Those are very small, and you know you're a liberal arts college when you have a very small class size. And there aren't pre-professional types of majors typically. I mean, once in a while there'll be an engineering major, but typically they don't have things like engineering and marketing and communications and finance and things like that. Those are more applied. And those are going to be more the domain of the hybrids and the research universities and all these other types of schools here that you see. The liberal arts is more pure. It's kind of like the ancient liberal arts. It's a focus on just a lot of writing, a lot of critical thinking, and a lot of public speaking. It's like a prep school. Think of it like a boarding school or prep school. And basically these schools have the #1 success in terms of feeding into graduate schools. And certainly PhD programs are the best in the world at doing that, at getting you a paid PhD of 5 to 7 years paid. So why is that true? And we'll get into that in a second. But one of the things to just consider is they're usually about 1,000 to 2,000 kids. And they take kids from all over the country and sometimes the world. And basically it's just you and a professor kind of an idea. Okay, so most colleges like Harvard used to be a liberal arts college, and then it's kind of got these other capabilities stacked on top of it. But let's move to the next type here. And I want to first go to the research university. The research universities are what we know. They're famous. They're often famous for what happens at the top, which is the graduate level. And so in the case of Berkeley and Stanford, for example, a lot of the focus is going to be on the graduate study with working on master's degrees, professional school stuff, PhDs, right? When I say professional schools, I'm talking about business law and medicine. So just to give you an idea, at UC Berkeley, there's about 20,000 undergraduates versus Pomona has about 1,500 roughly, okay? So it's a huge difference, right? Order of magnitude difference in terms of size. The kids at Pomona are getting a lot of personal attention from professors, and that makes a big difference in their ability to go to graduate school. The kids at Berkeley have a lot of different classes that they can take, and they have amazing choices, probably some of the best choices in terms of different types of majors and classes to take, and there's a lot of diversity there. So it's really a different kind of experience. Like tools for gardening, you want to pick the right tool. Now here's the thing. Most employers know Berkeley. Most employers have not heard of Pomona. So again, if you want to go to graduate school, and that's you're there, you're pretty much sure of that, like 80% sure, then Pomona might be a great choice. But if you're really sure that you're not sure, you kind of want a job, Berkeley would be a better choice, just in this limited example. Then in the middle, kind of size-wise, is Santa Clara, and that gives you some of the teacher interaction, and you're not only getting teaching assistants, but you're going to have some and fewer lecture classes, a little bit more of the kind of round table type discussion classes at Santa Clara, but you're going to only have those at Pomona, right? That's pretty much mostly what it is. Maybe once in a while, a rare moment will be a lecture. It's always going to be a smaller conference-style class or just a roundtable discussion with professors. So you're going to, and no TAs really at Pomona. So get a little, maybe, not too many TAs at Santa Clara, and then you're going to get more TAs at the bigger schools, just to give you an idea, and more lectures. But much more exciting professors that have written books and are kind of like rock star types, So it's just a different type of learning, and it's important to know these differences. The teachers' colleges, and in California, they're called the California State University system. And those are really good for educating K through 12 teachers. They've morphed into comprehensives lately, and in the case of like Arizona State, they offer a lot of different things. So you can look at that. Polytechnics are really many technologies, and they exist in almost every state. The famous ones in the Ivy League, for example, would be Cornell. That's a polytechnic. And in the UC system in California, it's Davis. UC Davis, and then in the CSU system, it's Cal Poly. The way that you're at a polytechnic, surprisingly, is it's agriculture and engineering. So is that you'll have cows on campus, right? They're using them for different ways to experiment and look at agriculture and science. So those are pretty much most of them, and we'll just finish up here by talking about specialty schools. Now, specialty schools are kind of one-trick ponies. They really focus in on one thing that they do and one thing only. Babson, is a great business school, and Juilliard happens to be a performing arts school. So you can see that there are engineering schools. There are specialty schools for almost everything you want to do in life. So those can be really good, but you have to be sure that that's what you want to do. And so they give you probably quite a bit less freedom in terms of what you do later. And certainly if you go to Babson, you can go and do an MBA, or you can do maybe a variety of things that relate to economics and business, but it might be harder to do sciences, for example, and get a PhD in the sciences, just because that school really isn't as focused on that. We'll go to the next part here, just a quick trade-off thing. If you're looking at more the smaller size schools that are liberal arts, the trade-off here versus the bigger schools are more kind of graduate level focus, right? This is a little trade-off thing here. If you go to liberal arts, where everyone's graduate bound, right, like Pomona, 80% or so, or 70% might be graduate bound. They're really there to teach undergraduates, and the chance of you doing research with a full professor is really, really much improved, higher. It's not 100% or anything like that. It's still hard to do, but the chances of you co-authoring an article, say with your science professor, chemistry professor, might be might be 3 or 4 times higher than if you're going to a bigger school, say Berkeley, where there's just so many more students, and there's really no opportunity for the professors there to really help a student do undergraduate research. I mean, it does happen, but on a per capita basis, it happens less frequently. So that's the power of the smaller schools. The bigger schools, really, they tend to be more focused on graduate research, and they're great to go for graduate school and also for jobs, right? So employers know them because of their graduate research. The other thing I might point out is if you're going to get one degree and you're going to go overseas with it, really these smaller schools aren't as well known overseas. And they don't show up in the rankings, because the rankings of schools internationally anyway, like the Times of London ranking, really emphasize postgraduate or graduate level research. So that's really why those schools like, say University of Toronto or Berkeley will be very, very high up on the list of international schools. Okay, here's the idea. I want to talk a little bit about admission now and switch gears. How do people get in? How does it work? I know this is going to be a question that many of you have as sophomores and juniors. And if you know the rules now, it's a lot easier later. So here's just an example of Boston University, and it's not the most recent admit rate. This is a couple years old, but just to give you an idea, 58% admit rate overall. Does that mean that you have like roughly a 1 in 2 chance of getting in? It might seem like it, right? But in fact, this is really what we call a blended rate. So there are certain people that are going to get in ahead of you, or the class is going to be picked first, and that's going to include flags and tags. Folks that, Michelle Hernandez actually wrote a book about this called A is for Admission and focused on this. But basically what it is it's athletes, minorities, and legacies. And 40% of the class is going to be taken up at private schools by these flags and tags. So that means that there's only 60% of the class left. And in this case, really giving you roughly a 40% or less chance on a 58% admit rate. So you can kind of use the same technique. And if the school that you're looking at is higher or lower, and in the case of Harvard, at a 6% admit rate, which is the current admit rate at Harvard, that number, after the athletes, minorities, and legacies are taken out of the equation, is going to be about 3.8%. Now, 3.8%, should we be talking about or worrying about a place where the inverse, roughly 96% of the time you can't get in? It's just really like gambling on that point. It's pretty unlikely, right? You can only be sure of something 95% plus or minus 5%. So the sense of not getting in is pretty sure in those cases where schools are 10% or lower, just to kind of give you an idea. So let's look at this next slide, and it just kind of gives you another idea of how admission works. The new rules here, and this is really important for you to take to heart as a sophomore, take to heart as a junior, is that grades up front worth about 75% of the picture. And then the other 25% is going to be your SAT 1 or possibly your SAT 2s or subject tests as they're called. Now, the thing to remember is that the grades and the class rank are the most important thing. Okay, without that, you really don't have the deal to offer the school. So you need to make sure that you're going to fit into where their averages or their medians are going to lie. And one way to look at this is College Data is a really great website that shows kind of a distribution of those GPAs. And class rank also is very important. If you're ranked in the bottom half, it's harder to get in. If you're ranked in the top half, it's easier. If you're ranked in the top quarter, it's even easier. And if you're ranked in the top 10, well, you can consider pretty much every school to look at least initially. Now, admission, I wish it was just based around GPA, class rank, and test scores. It isn't anymore. It's often based around activities and the application itself. So activities, let's think about that for a minute. They're a really big part of this. And this is something that another famous college consultant, Dr. Kat, as she calls herself, really came up with. And this is really that there's depth and leadership is the most important thing in your extracurriculars. And then it's really not just your local stuff, but it's more the state and the national level extracurriculars. If you're looking at national level schools, okay, just only for those people who are looking at the most competitive to get into schools. You're going to need to look at having national level extracurriculars. I mean, it certainly helps. It's not absolutely a necessity, but it certainly helps. When you're looking at who they're going to, that 3.8 that they might accept, say at Harvard, they certainly are going to take people who won the list competition for piano, which is international, the Intel competition for science, and so on. You kind of get the idea, right? Or put up a Broadway play, or wrote a novel, or isolated Native American DNA, whatever it is. It's going to be kind of on that level that's going to be helpful. They're not so much looking for well-rounded people. So keep in mind that the extracurriculars and the application itself can be worth half the picture. And the GPA, the SAT are just what we term the chopping block. If you can make it past that, or the hurdle that you have to make past to get looked at. And if your GPA and your SAT scores are at or above the mean, you get looked at, okay? Now, again, if you're an athlete, you're recruited by that school. If you're an underrepresented minority, and these days it typically means Native American for sure, and certainly African American as well as Latino. But it may not necessarily mean Asian American. Depends on the school, okay, where if it's an over or underrepresented group. And again, I'm speaking for private schools. Public schools can't do that. They can't really take into consideration race in the admission process. They can take into consideration income, though. So it's very important, if you're first generation or low income, to make sure that you're certifying yourself through your extracurriculars to show that. You might talk to your high school counselor about that. Okay, for ways to do that. What's our next slide here? We're just going to focus going through these quickly. Colleges are not looking for well-rounded kids. They're going to build a well-rounded class of individual experts, and that's all this means. And they're looking for diversity that's going to meet their needs. They're selfish. What's in it for them? That's the main thing. You've got to show what's in it for them, and that's how you get in. If you do this successfully, you get in and you win merit money. Now let's talk about how you screen colleges some more. Okay, we talked about admission. We're going to go back to how you screen schools. One of the things that you might look at is how successful the schools are in helping you get jobs. If getting a job right out of college is the most important thing, then I recommend going to pay scales rankings, and you can just Google or Bing or however you like to use this. Google or Bing pay scale ranking graduate rankings pay scale. And you should come up with a ranking of the colleges in the United States based on their starting salaries and the 10-year out or mid-career salaries. And that's a great source of information and has some really surprising conclusions. A couple years ago, Harvey Mudd was the #1 school in America in terms of generating a salary for people 10 years out and had a very high starting salary as well. And perennially, it seems as though Dartmouth and Princeton seem to be at the top. Okay, let's look at some of the other factors when you're looking at building a list of schools that you should really take into consideration. One is graduate school acceptances. We've been talking a lot about this. If you have more than a 50% chance that you want to go to graduate school, then finding a good feeder school is going to be #1 on your priority list. The Wall Street Journal about 5 years ago or so published what's called the top 50 feeder schools to the professional schools. And then Franklin and Marshall did a study about the weighted baccalaureate origins. I know that's a very weighty word, but the weighted baccalaureate origin study that you can look up, and you can see where, since, for the last 75 years or so, or 80 years, where people have gone as undergraduates that have gotten PhDs essentially paid for study at the highest rates. And it's not the normal schools that you would think of that would be high on the list. Just to give you an idea, Berkeley won't come up as high as, say, a smaller school might, okay? Just to give you an idea. So some schools that, we don't think of that often, like College of Worcester in Ohio is going to be very high for physics PhD production and for science PhD production in general. And it could be a very good choice for the right person. Okay, and then graduate school acceptances. Look at the Wall Street Journal top 50 feeders list to law schools, business schools, and medical schools. Okay, you can Google that or Bing it. Another really important thing is just how happy are students on campus, right? Happiness is a big factor. You want to look at students' reviews, comments. That's a really good source of kind of the unvarnished truth. Some of them, the negative comments, are very negative. I recommend taking those with a grain of salt. The positive ones are very helpful, and the neutral and also the advice I really like a lot. I highly recommend studentsreview.com to check out the happiness factor. And there are other surveys too. Now, success. We all are interested in having our students have great success. One of the ways to measure this is training leaders. And Forbes magazine, I think, has the best college rankings out there. They really make the outcomes, in other words, people that become CEOs or do great things or become Rhodes Scholars or, do a bunch of stuff, who are maybe in who's who in the world, right? Where did they go as undergraduates? And also, do they feed into graduate schools at a high rate? They did all that stuff, and they came up with a list. It's very biased towards small schools. You'll see that right away. But that's something that I think you should really take a look at. It's just the Forbes magazine's college rankings. It's another way to look at things. I think U.S. News is very helpful for specifics, in terms of looking at the data, top 10% stats and SAT scores and basically whether or not students finish in a certain number of years and all of that. Now, the next thing here is extracurriculars, right? And you want to create, one of the important things to focus on is helping yourself get into colleges is to really focus in on extracurriculars. And the way to do that, because again, that's 50% of the picture, is to build what I like to call an activity sheet, okay? It's been called a brag sheet by others, but basically I think it's one of the best ways to start taking inventory. And once you do that, you're going to be able to figure out how you're different and the places in which you might be able to lead, right? So it's really critical to do this. And we're going to show you that, in a sense, how you're different is way more important than how you're the same as everybody else, okay? It's critical. And this is the first example here of an activity sheet. You can kind of see here, academic awards and honors. Why do you think those are #1? They're #1 because those are the most important things to colleges. That's all they really care about is academic awards and honors. Now, they don't really care about the typical kind of like dean's list, honor roll kind of stuff. That's normal. They're looking for things that are unusual, okay? Special, maybe even outside of class, especially outside of class, especially outside of your school, things that are third-party verified, okay? What would be an example of that? Well, you might win a debate competition, right? That would be a state-level debate competition. That would certainly be an academic award or honor. Maybe you wrote some kind of a paper that was a poem, or a paper that was published somewhere in Concord Review, or you wrote a poem that Scholastic published. That is definitely an academic award and honor. That's the kind of thing that colleges look for. Now, they look for academics, extracurriculars first, and then leadership second. Now, music, what do you think that is? French language. Do you think these are academic, or would they seem like leadership? They're academic all the way. So the examples here that I'm giving you, they're all academic. That's because that's what colleges first and foremost care about. Then they care about leadership second. So even if you're an Eagle Scout, it's secondary to doing tutoring, right? Or to doing some kind of work outside of class that's academic. As I said before, the most important thing is not to just do stuff at your high school level. It's to focus and lead in the extracurriculars, and then scale those from the high school level toward the national level. So giving science fair competitions is a great idea. Say you've got a science fair project that you're working on. It's a chemistry project. You're analyzing, how people are looking at, some kind of a protein, in a chemical process, and maybe it's relevant to some kind of disease. But you're looking at that, and you're doing it at your high school level, and maybe you got your high school, one of your teachers to help you with it, your high school chemistry teacher, your biology teacher, and then you decide to take it to a regional state fair, and not a state fair like with animals, but a state fair for science. And so science fair, and then you go toward the national level, or international level with the Intel competition. So you win some regional and state competitions, and then you take it to the higher level. And that's really a great example of scaling right there. That's what you need to do, only if you're interested in getting into the most difficult to get into colleges in America, and also building building your potential up for winning merit awards. Now, our students win the highest number of merit awards in the country. Last year, about 57,000 off the bill at a private school. So we really know what we're talking about when we say it's critical for you to build these kinds of value in the admission process that is going to resonate with colleges. And just to give you an idea, it's all relevant to each particular college. So each school needs a different thing. So that's important to kind of look at as well. So let me just run through some other things very quickly, other sort of talents that you might have that can really help with admission. If you're an athlete, you want to look at what division level you are. You can ask your coach, hey coach, am I Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 probably, or Division 1, right? And you can build a resume, and an athletic resume, and a cover letter, and then maybe shoot a video with some of your skills, either gameplay and then some of your individual kinds of skills or technical abilities. And what you can then do is start marketing that to colleges. Okay, that can really help you as an athlete. We don't have time to go into this in detail, but there is more information on the web for sure. Leadership, this is a great example of what colleges see as leadership. It's different from taking a leadership class, very different. But if you're class president of your school, or senior class president, junior class president, whatever it is, that's something. So student government, being a team captain of a sport, or founder of an organization, these are the things that colleges really care about. And there are many more, but these are just the ones that come to mind. The other thing that I want to say is beware of any activities that include the word leadership in them. They really may not be that great. And blaze your own trail when it comes to leadership. That's the point of the slide. You can see this person wearing different colored leggings here. You really want to be different. It's all about being different, not about being the same. I know it's the opposite of what it's like to be in high school, because I was in high school a long time ago, and I remember it was important to fit in, to be cool. It's very important now in the admission process to do quite the opposite, to not fit in, to stand out, okay, and to be different. So it's going to fly in the face of convention. The other thing is, if you're an artist, here's another example of what you might do. You can build a portfolio around your art, professionalize it, right? So it might include an art resume, all the things you did each year, the classes that you took, any instruction that you had in specific art media. And you might also include works of art, naming them and so forth. And then you'll have an artist statement, which is kind of your viewpoint on how your influences and how you created the work that you've created. And by the way, no one can argue with an artist statement, because you're the artist. You get to say what it is. And then what you want to do is have a teacher give a letter of recommendation, or win some awards, which is the third-party verification here, like the Scholastic Art Award is a great example of that. Now, in science, I just want to bump between a couple of these things. If you're doing science, think to yourself, what is my idea? If I had 40 hours to research something, what would it be? So you take that idea, you apply the 40 hours, and boom, you've got a science project. It's not more complicated than that. But you do want to use your science teacher to help you. Make sure you're using the scientific method, and if you're doing primary research, that's critical, and maybe you're doing some kind of using secondary sources or whatever it is. Now, the major science competitions, just to mention these, because I know a lot of you are going to be involved in science, I want to just do a quick run through of a few that I think are particularly attractive to colleges. Admission departments. The Siemens competition, it's kind of up there with the Intel competition. So those two are one of the big ones. They're the granddaddies in a sense. And the Intel's been called the Junior Nobel Prize, sort of competition, because Nobel Prize winners help judge these. And then FIRST Robotics is really picking up steam. That's really fun to do. FIRST Robotics is great. I think that's a pretty interesting, thing. It's really, really helpful. And I think that you're really gonna, if you're into robotics, this is something that you're really gonna enjoy. Hands-on. You get to do kind of like different types of robots, right? The kind that are on the ground and the kind that do other places. I guess flying and whatever it is. Check into FIRST Robotics if you have an interest in that. The BioGenius competition is more geared toward biotechnology and bio research stuff that's involved in biosciences and biotechnology. And that's really a hot topic now, and many students and parents are getting involved. Now, how do you get merit money? Now, merit money is free money given by the colleges, right? You don't have to apply for it. It's just given through the admission process. Now, it's not given usually by, some schools don't give it at all. So the kind of top tier colleges just say they don't give it. They give financial aid if you qualify. They don't give merit money. Now, but your schools like some of those great schools that I talked about, like College of Worcester, for example, in Ohio, or Pomona. Well, Pomona doesn't give merit awards typically, but College of Worcester does, and that's the kind of school that can get someone into a PhD program very quickly in physics or chemistry if they wanted to do that. But let's just use that as an example. So your grades in testing would matter. Certainly that's just the starting point, and some schools give a little bit of merit award on that basis. If you have really high SATs or you're in the top 10% of your class. But I think it's the academic extracurriculars and the leadership in your extracurriculars that's really going to make the difference. If you're an Eagle Scout, that's going to help. But if you wrote a paper, or you were in one of these science fair competitions, or you're a junior symphony level musician, that's the kind of thing that really would set you apart and help you win merit money. So it's kind of the confluence, if you think about it. Winning merit money and admission is the confluence of this value that you offer the school and the value you get in return. So it's your points of difference. It's the other applicants' offerings, right? Their strengths and weaknesses, and the college's needs. So your goal is to bypass the weaknesses in the applicant pool to meet the unmet needs at the school, and then you get in and you win merit money. So it's no more complicated than that. Now, the money generators, I think, just here are a few examples. Math and science, big one. But again, the competition in math and science is pretty severe in this country because we're a country of got a lot of strong math and science students. And a lot of resources for that. Performing arts and fine arts, I think, are really undervalued. This is a place where you can really stand out, really win some merit money. But again, it needs to be third-party verified. You have to have the kind of coaching, the kind of music teachers or voice teachers or whatever it is to get you to that next level. So it's usually something outside of your school, and it might require tutoring. So it's important to get the right kind of coaches to get you there. And some coaches will work for free. So if it's an issue of money, I think it's more, if you have the talent and you've got the drive or the curiosity and the passion, there's always going to be people that will work with you out there. Writing is another one. If you have a writing portfolio, we work a lot with students that are top writers. And writing and poetry are, we have someone who's a specialist in this area, a national expert. And so if you have a poetry portfolio, for example, or a writing portfolio, some prose, we're able, for example, and I think you could help yourself, but there are people out there that can help coach you and help you to that next level through editing, and through really running you through the paces as a poet. And there's certainly summer enrichment programs that I might encourage you to look at. And there are some, for example, in writing, Iowa Writers Workshop has a young Writers Workshop. That's the top graduate school program for creative writing. Poetry, there are many examples of good poetry programs at universities. Any major university should offer a summer class in poetry or writing that could be helpful. Leadership, Girls State is a great example for, boys and girls states are great examples in all states, or most states, of leadership, and Junior Statesmen of America is another one. Certainly Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, those are the kinds of things. But leadership can take many forms, and it can certainly be something that you do, when you start your own organization to help stop, female, infanticide in the Punjab region of India or something like that. So in math, math and science here, what you need to do is you need to attend the camps. And there's a couple examples here. You can read these. Create your own project and then compete. It's that simple. So you attend, you create, you compete. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Performing arts. You need to perform, learn, create, and then compete. So you're performing. An example of that might be in your class at school, right? In your music class. And then band or symphony, and then you perform, say, junior symphony level in your local area, and then you learn from leading teachers and coaches, and then you maybe create a composition portfolio, and then you compete in this international music, and this is a piano competition, the list, to give you an example. So it's perform, learn, create, and compete, okay? Pretty self-explanatory there. Writing portfolio, it's write, learn, and compete. So you write what you know, you learn from writers, and you go to these workshops that we talked about, or you take a class at a local university. Those are good places from the English department. And then you compete in the scholastic writing competition. Now, even if you couldn't go to a class, you could always have your high school English teacher possibly tutor you, or hire a tutor would even be better, right? Find a student who's really a great writer in your local community, and they can help you. Okay, so that gives you an idea. So write, learn, and compete. College visits are critical, I think, to getting in. People think of them more as a way to learn about a school. I prefer that you already know about the school before you get there, and you use it to gather even more critical information about the school, but you do your research before you get there. Now, I want you to say, before you go there, be sure that you know what attracts you academically about the school, and write that down. And what can you only get from the school, a professor, a class, a program that you can't get from any other school? Write all these things down. Now, here's a visit kind of checklist before you go for your visits. And as sophomores and as juniors, I recommend starting this even if you're a freshman. You can, well, it's a little early, but you can still visit schools. Call the admission office, arrange to attend a class if you're a junior. If you're a sophomore, you can do the campus tour. And you can, if you're a junior, you can do the interview with the admission office, especially if you've already applied. Okay, so this is kind of rising senior, junior/rising senior kind of stuff here. And then you can talk to current students and ask them about their likes and dislikes. And the dislikes are something that you can bring back with you and corroborate, and that's really gold. What that means is that the dislikes, if you talk to between 7 and 10 students, it's like a survey. It's qualitative, it's not quantitative, but you're basically able to find out from the current consumers of that service, the education at that particular school, what their likes and dislikes are. And the dislikes are going to help you get in. If you can solve any of those problems, that can only help you win a spot in admission or help you generate merit money. While you're at school, there might be some things that you can do. So while you're visiting, so while you're out on campus, you might look at talking to the coaches or department heads, depending on what your specialization is, right? We're talking about getting specialized here, okay? And sophomores can still be a little bit general, but you want to start to focus your extracurriculars certainly by the junior year. Now we're coming to the end of this. I want you to definitely check out our website and College Match on Facebook. If you like us, you receive the 10 Strategic Admission Steps Guide. And I've got a book that's going to be out in a couple months. It's called brandyoubook.com, and it's all the steps that we do with our clients in this book. And it's a really great read, and I encourage you to go out and get it or buy it for a friend, okay? So now I'm going to start answering all the questions that you have. One of the things that I'd recommend is that you go to schools that have proven feeder capability to the graduate school you want to go to. So unfortunately, Yale is going to have a better medical school admission rate than Northeastern. So in this case, the example that you gave, now not everybody can get into Yale. Obviously almost nobody can get into Yale, 3.8%, remember, or less. So still, a better question might be Northeastern, or let's take Northeastern, or maybe trying to think of a school that might work. Connecticut College, say, or Hampshire College in Massachusetts. Maybe that's a better choice, right? Or Clark. I would recommend going to Clark or Connecticut College or Hampshire if you can afford it, because basically you're going to get more face time with professors. And that's the stuff that really matters to the admissions programs at the medical colleges. What medical schools are looking for, and you need to really know this before you look at medical schools, do your research, is that medical schools want people that have client interaction ability. In fact, there's a new medical school interview that really gets into that. They want people that, have the pre-med prerequisites in the sciences, the whole sequence, right? Organic, inorganic, all that stuff. And they want high grades, but if you go to a smaller college, sometimes you don't have to have as high grades. It's fine if you even have like roughly a 3.5 or even sometimes a 3.3. You can still go to medical school, believe it or not. But if you go to a bigger, more competitive school, sometimes it's a little bit tougher to get into medical school. Are you interested in going to graduate school, or are you going to look at getting a job? Which one of those? Job first, and maybe graduate school, or go to graduate school for sure. And that can really determine what a large part of what type of school you look at. The other thing is you want to look at the network. Do you want a regional network, a national network? There's many ways to do this. I think it really would require a lot of kind of digging in. And then you can also look at many different things in the process, more mandatories. Do they have fraternities and sororities? Are they religiously affiliated with my religion? Whatever it is, there's a lot to look at. And I think the best way to do this is probably just to start reading college guides, right? Or to get a college advisor. I really recommend that. Now, there's no one source of information that's great. What I recommend is taking all of these and putting them into the great computer, which is your brain, and then figuring out from there what are the best schools for you. So the question is, does the National Survey of Student Engagement, how does that kind of rank versus Forbes or US News or World Report's rankings? The student engagement stuff's really critical. It is. It's great. It's great. But it isn't the only source. It's narrow in one aspect, right? It doesn't take into consideration a bunch of different things. Probably my favorite is the Forbes ranking. But then when you look at the Forbes, sometimes the list looks a little bit off to me. So I think all of these are really good tools, but you kind of have to triangulate, meaning bring all of these different tools to bear on this problem. Okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation or one tool fits all. No, they don't have to be science-related activities, but I think it's better to do that because then you can vertically integrate what you're strong at. But remember, if you're applying then as the science person, the science gal, you've got to be the best science gal in their applicant pool, or the most interesting, or the most focused on X or Y. So it's really critical that you stand out somehow. That's more important. And science is a big category, so definitely you'll be able to do that. But my concern is that if you're doing too many different things like social work, make sure that it lines up with what you do in the science area, okay? So I hope that helps. Maybe work in a blood bank or do, research on DNA or whatever it is that's, helping homeless people. I don't know, but figure it out that way. That's a better way to do it. I mean, yes. My answer is yes. Go do a science Olympiad, Leonardo. That's fantastic, especially with your name. I think you're going to be really well disposed to doing science there. That's great. Thank you for that question, Leonardo. It's a very good one. Colleges love the science Olympiad. This is a complicated question. The question for me, that I'd want to ask you is, what year are you? Because if you have time to develop this sort of hobby into something that's more, a little bit more, kind of a bigger deal, then I think it makes sense to keep pursuing it. Now, if it's just a hobby and it's not going to help you get in, it's still, here's the thing. Music is still academic, so it's always valuable to do. It never hurts you. It only helps you. So I would just maybe emphasize it more in your application. And I think to the extent that you can really scale this, I would look to focus it on one instrument and really start to take classes outside of school and participate in bands. It couldn't hurt you. And if it's rock and roll, it doesn't matter as much, but it's still okay. Absolutely. I just talked about that. There's a Scholastic. You can look up the Scholastic competition, and there's definitely a poetry competition there. There's many. There's websites that have all of this information on them. You just got to do your research. You asked exactly the right question, because starting a nonprofit is great, but obviously it's very difficult to get a 501c3 status. It really takes an adult kind of stepping in to create it. It's not critical that you start a nonprofit. Colleges don't really think that you're going to do that. They kind of would be. It's sort of like, well, obviously an adult helped you with it, so you don't get as much credit for doing that. It's still important to do if it means. In other words, if it's a requirement for doing the kind of social or global sort of work that you want to do to help other people, then absolutely. But on the other hand, if it's not necessary, I wouldn't put all my emphasis or time into that basket, because it's not, I don't think it's required, in any way by a college that you have 501c3 status. You could just start an organization. Okay, student organization. A writing competition, Scholastic has one, again, just like the poetry one, the question we had before. The other ones, there's a whole host of them. Basically, it depends on what kind of writing you're doing, really. And literally, there are just so many of them that I can't even mention them all in the time that we have remaining, which is very short. So if they're a little easier to get into, I recommend visiting them. And if they're private, it matters more. If they're public, it doesn't matter quite so much, unless there's an issue like you're learning disabled or there's an issue of special fit. Then you should really go and visit and kick the tires and talk to the learning disability support specialists, meet with faculty, all that stuff, okay? And admissions people. But if it's normally, if it's private, I do recommend doing that. But again, if it's like Duke or Stanford or Harvard, they don't care that you go and visit. They don't care at all. It really doesn't matter. So it just kind of gives you an idea. Well, the colleges don't really want you bugging the departments. They want you talking to admission. Now, I only recommend you bugging the department if you're exceptional. And we have a client this year who I don't think he'll mind me mentioning this, but he won a British Petroleum Award for figuring out a better way to sample for drilling oil, and he's out of high school a couple years. If you're that exceptional, then yes, you should be talking to faculty. Or if you have a project that you're working on that's pretty amazing, and your high school, in other words, if your high school thinks you're really advanced, then yes, I'd recommend that. If you're just interested, sure, you could go talk to them, it doesn't hurt, but I wouldn't expect to get a lot of time out of the faculty. And it really won't impact your admission process, except help you understand more about the school. So yeah, you could talk to faculty if they'll give you time. Well, I think you should look at all the data with your dad and really sit down and talk with him and let him know that you can't just apply and select a particular school. It's very hard to get into pharmacy school, and that's usually a graduate program anyway. So, you're going to have to do kind of a pre-med beginner program, and then you go into pharmacy school afterward. There are some guaranteed pharmacy programs that kind of feed you in. You might want to look at those, or maybe that's what you're talking about here already. I'm just not aware. But basically, I would say that you guys can't just apply to one school anyway. You should really have a strategy where you're applying to reach 50-50 chance schools and safety. So apply to more than one anyway and explain that to your dad. He'll understand, hopefully. He wants the best for you. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say, it really depends, Charles, if on what your goal in life is. If your goal in life is to be a singer, then sciences aren't really going to matter to you at all. If your goal in life is to be, to get a job, then yeah, probably sciences might be better than music, I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you want to be a music instructor, though. So it really depends on who you are and what your interests in life are. So you've really got to do some hard thinking here. What's your goal in life? And then what are all the steps that are, to getting there? And then you'll be able to answer that question. I hope I've answered your question fully. It's a very good question, though. I think there's a bit deeper digging that you have to do. Your brag sheet really just needs to include academic awards and honors. Write down all your academic awards and honors since the end of 8th grade to the present, and then all of your anything you've done in different categories that are academic extracurriculars. So if you're focused on music or you're focused on science, and write all that stuff down. Give it a heading. Write it all down. And again, from the end of 8th grade to the present, and then all your leadership activities, same thing. And then maybe sports or whatever, then just keep putting all your everything you've done outside of class. Let's take full inventory of that. That's all it is. It's not more complicated. You don't need necessarily to see the format. You just need to kind of build your own, okay? Well, an internship isn't really academic necessarily unless it's academic, right? If it's an internship that's like in a science lab, then yeah, that's a big deal to colleges. But in general, internships just show that you've got more maturity, I think. It's like having a job, or that you care about a subject. So I think it's helpful if you're going into something really pre-professional to have an internship. Say, for example, if you're going into one of these 7-year kind of focused, BA to MBA programs, right, where they kind of just track you in, like a guaranteed medical admission track, then I think, doing an internship in a hospital would be critical to show that you're really the right person for that. Or if you're going to be an engineer, it's great to do an internship in an engineering firm. Do you see what I'm saying? If you're pre-professional in any way, internship helps you. If you're liberal artsy and you're going to go to grad school, it's more like, well, it shows maturity. It shows, some other stuff. It might prove that you're not lower income, but unless you have a job, maybe that would prove it. But basically, it's helpful, but it's not more important than working on something that's academic. Not at all. Definitely your extracurriculars should be, your academic stuff should become your extracurricular. So whatever you're great at academically, you should sign up and get involved in things in your outside of class that reflect that. So if you're good at math, do a math Olympiad or join math club. That's what I'm talking about, okay? You can apply as a junior is the short answer. The longer answer is you can apply as a senior, but early in senior year is really when you want to focus your application. So as soon as they're available, what I would say is gear them up in September would be the answer, September, October timeframe. I think it does, if it's just a sort of situation like you're going there, Phillips is obviously high quality, right? So it doesn't hurt, but it's not going to be enough to get you in or make up for, any other big deficiencies. It's way more important to max out what's going on at your high school. And if you've maxed it out and then you're going to Phillips because it's more advanced, that makes sense to me. It makes sense to admission officers as well. But I think if you're just going because it's prestigious, I would worry about that because it's generally prestigious, but it may not be the best. Remember, you need to be a specialist. So if you're into poetry, okay, great if they have a great poetry program that you can sell. But if it's just taking classes there, which is what it sounds like, it's better than maybe going to community college, but it's not necessary is what I would say. There are other things that you can be doing that would be more attractive to colleges. Okay, but great question. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there just are some other things. And again, it really depends on who you are and where you're looking at going to school and what things you are a specialist in. Great question. I just gave a lecture not too long ago at this homeschooling association, and I really think that homeschooling parents are really on top of things. It isn't harder. Some schools, I think schools across the board want to be open to homeschoolers, but it's a little bit tougher for them to gauge how well you're doing because the parents are doing, there's standard curriculum, all that stuff, but I think they put more emphasis on the testing. So really, I'd say ramp up the SAT scores. That's going to be more important. And then the things you do outside of class, wherever there's a third party apart from your parents that can verify something. I know that your curriculum is verified by the state and all that, or the school districts, but I would still look for ways to academically, if you're involved in, say, music, to get in the junior symphony or whatever it is, to get that verified by third parties like that. That's the kind of stuff that would be great. I love this question. I work with a lot of international students. In fact, this is one of my favorite things in life, is to help internationals get into American colleges. Now, the thing about it is that they're really, if you think about it this way, 90% or more of the spots are going to be dedicated to U.S. citizens. It's just that way. Just like your country that you're coming from, 90% of the spots are for people in country. That just is kind of the way it works. So what I recommend is that, so in that sense, it's harder. There's less spaces, right? There's 10% or less of the spots are going to be international students, but still a lot of spots. We have over 2,000 schools here, colleges. So it can be harder for them in some ways, but basically what I would recommend is that you really look into figuring out how you're different or unique. And the other thing is that if you're coming from a less represented country, that can really help you. But if you're coming from a country where there are lots of people that are represented in the student body, it won't be as attractive. So it's kind of about being a little bit exotic. The other thing is that it really means that you have to come in with something special. Now, it doesn't mean that you compete against everybody. In a sense, you're more competing against students from your home country that want to apply to that particular school. So you're in that. So say it's Harvard. You're competing against students from, say, everybody in Pakistan that wants to go to Harvard that year. That's really who you're competing against. Now, there may only be a very limited number of spaces for people from Pakistan in a sense, right? Or they're looking for somebody who's just exceptional in a sense. That person can defy the space allotment issue. It's fine. Colleges don't shy away from those at all. I wouldn't worry about it. Colleges were basically affiliated with churches early on, so it's not a big deal for them to see that kind of stuff. They're used to it. Now, UC Davis is the polytechnic in the University of California system. So in a sense, yes, it's part of this greater system called the University of California, but it isn't. Now, UC Davis is a distinctive college and UCLA apart from UCLA. So University of California, Los Angeles is different from UC Davis. UC Davis is a different city in LA, in California, and UCLA is in Los Angeles. So that's the difference, right? One's up here, one's down here. They're pretty far away from one another, but yeah, they're part of the same system. So there's Irvine, for example. There's Davis. There's San Diego. There's Santa Barbara, and so on. Okay, Berkeley, UCLA. I don't think it's helpful, I guess, but it doesn't. I don't think it's going to make or break your application. It's certainly helpful if you're talking about electives in your class, but I mean, I don't think that's really such a huge deal. I really don't. If and people aren't going to be judgmental. They might think it's cool if you took woodshop, for example, if you're an A student and your focus is, writing, and suddenly you took woodshop. They might think that's cool. Other people might say, well, why didn't you take a poetry, thing? Or I don't know. So it's really going to be case by case. I wouldn't worry about that. I just don't think that's going to matter that much, to tell you the truth. I just don't think that's a big deal. There's no one major. Anything you want to study is fine, as long as it's something that gives you kind of the ability to talk to people and write well. So English is good if you're asking. English or literature might be a good thing, but it doesn't matter. You can study history, you can study science. It really doesn't matter. Online schools are more and more a reality. Obviously, Kaplan has one. But basically, I recommend that you find, even things that aren't specific. I know that what you're saying is that there aren't clubs, right? Basically, because you're going to school online. But it doesn't mean that if you throw up a theater production in your home and invite people from your school, from around your area, geographically, around your city, your block, or whatever, that's something that's, it's basically theater. It's community theater. So if you do things like that are kind of informal, you can formalize those activities as long as you write good descriptions for them on your applications. IB all the way. They love IB. That's one of their big deals, is colleges love IB. Why? Because there's more writing. It's more like going to a private school almost. You do a lot of writing, really analyze your writing, a lot of critical thinking and public speaking, which is what they want. Okay, well, I think we're just about wrapped up. If you do get a chance, be sure to check out my book. It's going to be called, and I'll just give you the thing again here, it's brandnewbook.com, and this is the URL. And again, if you want to go to College Match on Facebook and like us, you can receive the 10 strategic admission steps, which cover a lot of what we talked about today. I wish you the best of luck. I know you're going to be successful in whatever you do, and just keep working hard at it, okay? Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. It's been great.